let's go now to Kari Fulton. She's an award-winning environmental justice advocate. Kari, thanks so much for joining us. Just first off, let's get your reaction on the failure of these UN talks.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And, it's unfortunate, but it's also a testament to the tough negotiation at hand. And it's also sad that the United States couldn't come in a little bit tougher, especially as we're stepping into an administration that may not be as stringent on plastic pollution and what we see in the future ahead.
Global efforts are now focused more on recycling rather than reducing production of plastics. Do you agree with that solution, or what's your thoughts?
I think it's a bit of a false solution because not all plastics are truly recyclable, especially when we talk about single-use plastics. And we have this conundrum that we saw with COVID where we tended to want to use single-use plastics as a safety concern, but then what happens to that waste and what does that do to our ecosystems and also to our public health considerations? So if we're continuing to rely on false solutions like over-reliance on single-use plastics instead of cleaning up our waterways, it's not where we need to be for the future we want.
From what I understand, even just breaking down plastics to recycle them creates more chemicals into the air and to those reused plastics once again. What should people on a macro or micro level rather be doing with plastics then? Do we stop recycling altogether, or do we more focus on how we purchase our products, whether it's we choose items that aren't pre-packaged, that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely. We still need to do recycling because there are a lot of plastics and there are a lot of other products, aluminum, as well as paper goods that need to be recycled. So recycling is a good thing. However, we also need to teach recycling education. And then in that process, we can think about what are other solutions and alternatives that we can use instead of plastics. So I love the companies that are doing things like thinking about how we use our water. How can we use canned water? How can we build filtration devices so that people can use their plastic bottles in a better way? And those plastic bottles are usually not single-use plastics, and they can be recycled a little bit better.
Are there other options and materials that could replace plastics?
I think that's the wild and wonderful world of science and technology. We see it all the time. We see more products that are using compostable goods. We're starting to see, canned water. So, and even thinking about ways that we can reduce our use of those by stopping to buy just those small little bottles and maybe think about, hey, maybe we need a bottle that's for more than one sip. So I really appreciate looking and seeing what the future could hold.
It's not just about environmental health though, is it? It's also about, the human health level in terms of micro and nanoplastics. Can you talk a little bit about, the impact of these minute areas of the plastic industry and how people can raise their awareness around them?
Of course. The biggest thing that people can do around plastic pollution is think about the source of where their plastic comes from. A lot of that comes from the petroleum industry. And so when we think about communities that we hear about like Cancer Alley, and we think about the communities like the organizers of Rise St. James that are fighting against the polluting plastics industry and petrochemicals, we know that there are people who are fighting, and they're not only fighting back against bad policy that is putting these polluting industries in their backyards, but they're also fighting for their lives. So that's really key in consideration of, where does this plastic come from? It comes from communities that are just like you and I, and they don't have to be impacted the way that they are, and we shouldn't have to live in a world that's like that.
All right, Kari Fulton, really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.